Hi, this is the ectocore. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the overview of the panel, and then I'll talk about how to load samples onto it. So this is just an image of it, but we can start at the top where this first knob kind of adds effects. There's 16 different effects, and I'll talk more about them. This knob is a Wrangler sequencer. This knob changes samples, and the button next to it helps to change between the 16 banks. The button down here is a trig out mode, which I'll talk a lot about. The button next to it is a clock out multiplier, so you can have this clock out, clock to other things, and keep things in sync. The trig out is nice because you can use it to trig on certain transients. This knob up here will make the sequence more random. This knob will change the effects that are being applied. CV ins you have for CV sequencing, for the effects, for the clock in, for the sample, and you have 16-bit stereo audio. Now today I'm going to talk about this SD card. The SD card holds 16 banks with 16 samples, and there's no sample limit. To get things on the SD card, you're going to want to go to ectocore.rocks. Oh, I forgot, there's a tap tempo button. Here we are at ectocore.rocks. Ectocore.rocks is essentially a way to prepare samples for the ectocore. The ectocore splits the performance workflow into performances and preparation. You use the ectocore tool just to perform with, and you use this ectocore.rocks tool to prepare for your performance, where you can organize, splice, and analyze samples. Let's get started by making our own workspace. Before I get in, though, I just want to mention up here you can click to get the latest firmware, you can click to download the latest manual, and you can click down here to use offline versions of this tool if you need. One caveat about this tool is that it is online, and these URLs are publicly available, but as long as you choose a URL that no one will know, no one will be able to access your information. If you don't want to, though, feel free to download one of the offline versions. So I'm going to create one called Mr. Shoe, name of my cat. And when you load now, you have 16 banks. You can select these different banks on the left, and then we can drop in some audio. Let's drop an audio into bank 1. And as you see right here on the right, this will automatically take OP1 drum patches, renoise splices, and morphogene reels and automatically splice them. So if you have those things, you can use the splicing inherent in those files. Let's just open up a sample from one of my library samples. As you can see, this sample has the BPM in the title. That's helpful for the tool to recognize the BPM, but if you don't have that, it will try to determine it by the length of your sample. And hopefully your sample is the length of a multiple of number of beats that it is. Otherwise, the splicing will get a little tricky. So once you loaded something, you can click on it. And when you click on it, it shows up in this other screen. Now here we have a bunch of things we can change. We can change it between stereo and mono. So this is a mono sample, but we can change it to stereo. If you have a stereo sample, you can change it to mono. Tempo matching is on, which means that when you change the tempo on the ectocore, it will change the pitch of this sample to match up, so that the tempo is always in sync. And the source tempo for this one in particular is 170, which is gathered from the file name. But again, if you have the right number of seconds in your slice, then it will figure out the BPM from that. For now, we're going to do waveform editing. We'll just hit slice here. And here we can change the slices. So you can easily just create even slices by hit create evenly. So before it had 32, so we can go back to 32, but don't have to have a multiple of 16. You could have a different number. But you can see like the 32 will align evenly with the transients pretty well. You can also create from transients. So say we wanted only 8 slices, but we wanted them on transients. So it would grab the best 8 transients to get slices from. And then you can click on these, and you can hear what each one sounds like. Let's go back to 16. If you really want to fine-tune your slicing, you can. So you can zoom in, you can click and drag to drag one around. And if you drag these endpoints, you can shrink and expand the slice. And you can pinpoint it exactly how you want. And when you click on it, you can listen to it. Now, you'll notice that there's some tiny little icons here, and these are transient trig outs. So when I showed you that trig out on the ectocore panel, those trig outs are triggered when these things happen. So there's one for kick drum, snare drum, transients, and these are automatically detected. So they're already put onto places where there is a kick drum, a snare drum, or a transient detected. But you can also click on it and drag it around. In order to click on it, you have to go to the waveform editing and toggle that. So now I can drag this around. I can also add in new ones if I wanted to by clicking somewhere else. And you can clear that last one or clear all of them by hitting clear last and clear all. And you can edit any one of these in any way you want so that when those transients are passed, it will send a trig out. So it's really nice if you want to have specific triggers on specific parts of your samples be prevalent when you use the ectocore. Let's add one more sample in. So we'll go here and find another one. And I've loaded another sample. You notice when I load it in, it says computing. So you have to wait until it's done computing before you can download these samples. This one detected the beats at 166, which is correct. And I think it looks fine, so I'll just leave it as is. The next thing you want to do before loading things onto the ectocore is editing the settings. If you go up here, you can click this little bar and you can edit the global settings on the ectocore. There's a number of different settings that you might want to change. I can go through them one by one. So the incoming clock behavior by default will stop if the incoming clock stops. This means if you have a clock clocking the ectocore, that clock will sync the ectocore. So for instance, if you have PAMs going into ectocore, if you stop PAMs, it'll stop the ectocore. If you start PAMs, it'll start the ectocore. You can also change it to continue if the clock stops, which means that the ectocore will keep playing no matter what. You can still clock the ectocore, but if the clock stops, the ectocore will keep running. Then the outgoing clock can be changed between a gate and a trig. By default, it's gate. And it can also be synced with the tempo or synced with the slice. So if it's synced with the slice and you have uneven slicing, you can get a very uneven output clock, which is something you might want to try. Now for the almond break and sample CVs, you can switch all of them between bipolar and unipolar. So bipolar, they'll accept -5 to +5 for full range, or unipolar 0 to 5. For the almond CV, there's a special behavior. So you can have, if you have bipolar selected, you can split the almond CV behavior so that if voltages come below 0 volts, it'll repeat at that voltage. If it's above 0 volts, it'll jump at that voltage. And the voltage is essentially like a volt per octave, but instead of changing the pitch, it's changing which slice you're on. So you can control slices very accurately with the almond CV. If you just want it to jump whenever you change this CV, so say you're sequencing the CV, you want jump on change, and you might just want to have this at unipolar. If you want to have it repeat at the CV, which means that you're sequencing fast enough that it will grab the next CV every single time, or it will just repeat the current note, then you can use that. If you want to do bipolar, then you have the ability to do both. The last thing is the brightness. So higher brightness will use a little bit more amperage and power, but 50% brightness is plenty easy to see. And finally, we have the grimoire of breaks. If we go back to this ectocore picture, we'll see this grimoire knob right here. It changes effects. And you can see there's these symbols around it. Each symbol corresponds to a collection of effects, and you get to choose which collection of effects those will be used. And then when you turn up this break knob, it will affect how many times those effects will be turned on during the course of playing. So you can go to any one of these runes, and then for each rune you have 16 different effects. You have distortion, compression, reduction, bit crushing, filtering, time stretching, delay, comb, beat repetition, reverberation, automatic panning, slowing down, speeding up, reversing, retriggering with pitch, and a tape stop. So if I have this rune set only to time stretch maybe and reverse, when I have the knob turned here and I turn the break knob, these are the only two things that can happen. And the higher I turn the break knob, the more likely these things are going to happen. So what I like to do often is have the runes go from less to more effects so that my knob itself, I kind of know what's going on. But you can also keep track of these and be very diligent on how you want your effects to go. So if you never want the tape stop effect, you can go through and unclick all the tape stop effects so that never occurs. Or if you want each one to be just a single effect, you can certainly do that. You can have every single one be its own effect. And then when performing with the ectocore, you can simply turn this knob to change which effect is happening. Now once you're done with the settings, you can hit update or you can hit download settings. If you hit download settings, it'll download a file, and this file contains the settings folder. The settings folder is all you need to have to put on the ectocore. Here I have the ectocore SD card, and I have an old settings folder, so I'll delete that settings folder and paste in the new settings folder. And that has all the settings for everything we just set. If you want, you can actually edit these names themselves to change the settings, but that's more of a power user feature. Now to download the actual samples into the ectocore, we hit this download.zip. And this will actually download the settings as well. I just did that separately. So if we go here and go here, now we can copy these two things, bank 1 and settings. First, delete everything on the ectocore chip when you're replacing, and then paste. If you have a totally new bank, like bank 2, you can just copy the bank 2 folder here and it'll be just fine. So when you're all set, eject the SD card and you can load it into the ectocore and you're ready to go.